What's going on, guys? TG or ThunderGod here, back with a pretty interesting video. Today I am doing what if Obito and Pain swapped fights, the leader of the Akatsuki versus the Shadow Leader. I think there's a ton of succulent and juicy info to really get into for this discussion, so without further ado, let's just get straight into the video. Starting off, we have Kid Obito in the place of Nagato against Jiraiya Shadow Clone. I think this one is pretty free, especially if you go with the most peak version of Obito that we see during the 3rd grade Ninja War, the one who was Chunin level without a Sharingan, then got a Sharingan and was able to fight Iwa Jonin. I think this one is pretty free for Obito. Now, it's kind of weird because Jiraiya does credit all 3 individuals for actually defeating a Shadow Clone, although he does dodge Yahiko's Water Style, and it's actually Nagato's Gale Palm that pushes Konan's paper into Jiraiya's chest. But I don't think like Nagato exhibiting the Gale Palm, which is like a C-rank jutsu, is really that crazy to the point it just overshadows anything Obito can do. Not saying Obito's stronger, I'm just saying I think he's stronger than a Gale Palm with his Sharingan and stats respectively. So I don't really see a reason Obito with Yahiko and Konan as support couldn't just beat this same version of Jiraiya's Shadow Clone. He's a mid Chunin to even low Jonin if you want to wank it type of fighter at this point. Next up, we have Kid Nagato versus the Hidden Stone Ninja. And I'm going to be honest, Kid Nagato's kind of cracked. He has all 5 nature releases. And again, it was his jutsu that was the main factor in actually taking down Jiraiya's Shadow Clone. Nagato also showing the ability to slaughter an Iwa Chunin off screen, but we do know this was an involuntary response. However, Jiraiya does make it a point to try and help Nagato train his Rinnegan a bit. And it's kind of hard to judge how strong a Jiraiya Shadow Clone is in comparison to people like Kako, who's just noted to be skilled in ninjutsu, taijutsu, and genjutsu, and is just generally an extremely powerful Iwa Nin. Elite Jonin are generally a step above every other village in terms of Jonin, so I kind of do lean towards Nagato's feat of just defeating a Jiraiya clone, as he just has arguably better support in the form of Kakashi. It's unclear if Nagato would be able to see Taseki, though that's the Iwa Jonin who pretty much can just turn invisible and camouflage. The reasoning for this is because Nagato's Rinnegan isn't in full bloom yet, like he doesn't have access to all of the abilities. This is more so later on. Nagato has 2 pretty much awakenings with his Rinnegan. The first was when his parents had died, and the second big one was actually when Yahiko had died. So things like the Rinnegan being able to sense barriers and whatnot are harder to just give to that first awakening Nagato. You know what I mean? It's not quite as clear cut, but if you give him the benefit of the doubt, then none of the Iwa Jonin should really just give him as much trouble, especially if he does still have Kakashi as support. Next up, we have the Mist Anbu that were chasing down Rin that Obito had taken down when he went mad after seeing Kakashi kill Rin. We know this unit is comprised specifically of Jonin and Anbu Black Ops, along with the fact that this unit all has like matching faceplates. What's interesting is that this unit could be comparable in strength to the Undertaking Squad or the Hunter Nin that Haku was masquerading as. We see that in the beginning of part 1 that it's noted that all of the Hunter Nin have the same mask. However, more interesting is that in the Utakata filler, which is actually canon to the Naruto Shippuden anime, as Naruto directly interacts and recognizes Utakata later on in the war, there actually are Hunter Nin that are sent down with different masks to actually track down Utakata, the 6 Tails in Cherokee. The Undertaker Squad from Prestige alone was kind of convincing Kakashi that Haku was stronger than him. That's obviously a different group since they all have matching different faceplates, but they are comprised of a blend of Anbu Black Ops and Jonin, with this group actually intending to attack the Leaf with the 3 Tails. So Obito actually took down like a group of shinobi that were just going to attack an entirely different village, who, if you did kind of want to extend that over and say they also threw in some Hunter Nin, you could have a large scale group of Zabuza to Kakashi level shinobi. Now, that's the most generous interpretation. That's assuming that some Hunter Nin were in the group, which there could be since they did actually want to retrieve Rin's corpse after Kakashi had actually killed her, with the whole idea behind the Undertaking Squad being that they pretty much destroy the body and take the head to just make sure the jutsu or secrets that lie inside the individual's body isn't just handed over to the enemy. Obviously, we don't know for certain. I just think it was interesting to note. If you go at Nagato before he actually just has his second blossoming, which sounds weirder than it is, he's literally featless. We don't really have anything for him, and there's not really much to go off of. If you do have him enraged when he took down Hanzo, this is a pretty clear like no diff for him with the Geto Mazo. Like nothing should really prevent him from taking down all these shinobi in a similar manner, especially if he summons the Soul Dragon and all the same conditions apply. So even if you gave this group the best interpretations, like I mentioned before, which it probably isn't the case, it still really wouldn't mean much to Nagato at this point. So assuming he's in that enraged state, he probably just clears. If he's not in that second blossom, he actually may just not clear this area. We don't really know how strong that version of Nagato is, so it's kind of harder to use him. He probably wouldn't need the Soul Dragon in all honesty. Like the Geto Mazo itself should just be able to wipe here. No real issues. Next up, we have Obito versus Hanzo. Now, the version of Obito we're going to be looking at is the version with like the Guru Zetsu outfit, since this is the version that actually interacts closest to this form of Nagato. This Obito is the one with the Guru Zetsu outfit, pretty much amping his wood style. He can use wood style without it, but it does seem like the added bonus of having Guru on him allows him to just protrude more wood from him and allow Obito to use it much more extensively. For example, if you actually look at that like spiral of trees, all of that is just protruding from Obito's arm. So even though he does have wood style generally, it does seem like the suit is just amplifying his wood style capabilities in a similar manner to when Yamato was wearing it. On top of this, Obito at this point does know the Uchiha Forbidden Jutsu, 6 pads jutsu, such as the light and shadow style, which I'm going to talk about why that's important in a couple different matchups, but kind of similar to Obito versus the Hidden Mist Shinobi, there's nothing really here that suggests that Obito would struggle too much with what Nagato faced. The only possible issue here is obviously Hanzo. This is the point in Hanzo's life where he does seem to just shift his shinobi ways and values into that version that we see in the war arc, but he probably hasn't done it enough or been in that mind state long enough for it to actually affect his strength. So this could very well be a prime version of Hanzo that we're dealing with. The Hidden Rain and Leave Anbu really aren't going to be presenting that many issues for Obito. It's really, can Hanzo capitalize on what Obito is doing with maybe Buse and some of the poison cloud that he uses. For example, in character, Hanzo will just spew out a poison cloud and fight inside of it while his opponents are paralyzed. So you have to ask yourself, does Hanzo defeating 3 weaker versions of the Sannin really give him a pass here? In my opinion, not really, mostly due to the fact that Obito at this point should be somewhat close to the version that fought Minato, which is the same version that has all the statements about Naruto needing the Nine Tails power to master it, yada yada yada, in order to fight that version of Obito. There are some points you can argue, like Obito maybe not being as refined with his jutsu or not having complete mastery over Kamui yet, which while I think is fair, his strength should mostly be the same. He has mastered all the 6 pads jutsu or has learned it, plus has far more wood style than he would normally to kind of make up the difference. Hanzo's large scale poison via Buse, if he does decide to use it, really wouldn't present that many issues for Obito, and that is how Hanzo likes to fight. He likes to spread the poison and then fight inside the poison mist. Obito could just use wood style to restrain the summoning creature or Hanzo himself. Nothing in Hanzo's arsenal is really that threatening, and he should be coming in somewhat close to the version that fought Minato. Even if you think he's a bit weaker, just him being comparable would already put him a good tier above those 3 versions of the Sannin that Hanzo just scales above. And again, even if you think Obito isn't used to his abilities, which is a very fair take, he has access to 6 pads jutsu and wood style to kind of make up that difference. Next up, we have Pain versus Minato during the Nine Tails attack. Now, this is rather interesting since this version of Minato should be a bit fatigued or physically worn down, as he had just been constantly suppressing the Nine Tails through Kushina's childbirth, which is kind of important since for first-time mothers, childbirth can go from 12 to 24 hours. So Minato would have had to have been suppressing the Nine Tails for a prolonged period of time, as that's when it's weakest, and that's when the Nine Tails was fighting to break out of its seal. Now, this version of Minato just has better implications for where he is strength-wise than Pain. Whether you think he's like KCM 1 level, KCM 2, somewhere in the middle, these ranges do put him in good standing to have the edge on Pain. If you're under the interpretation that Minato is like sub-Sage Mode Naruto level, by all means, Pain wipes, we can keep it moving. But there is a bit of basis to suggest Minato did improve from his Jonin counterpart that's more consistently compared to Naruto's KCM 1 or QB Chakra mode. I've mentioned these in other videos, so I won't proceed to beat a dead horse down. Interesting point my buddy Sage of Thick Calves brought up in his Minato video, highly recommend, check that out, is that Minato's name is written on the scroll contract with the Toads as 4th Hokage, which does cement that Minato would have been improving past his Jonin stage, as he would have gone through the Toad training and actually gotten the Toad summonings like Yamabunta when he was actually Hokage, which makes sense as this would be why his Sage mode really wouldn't be as refined as someone like Naruto, as he just didn't have enough time to training it, balancing that in his Hokage duties. The upgrades don't stop there for Minato, however, as there is a statement that I recently came across in Data Book 2, specifically the mini directory, which is just a blob of kanji in the back of Data Book 2, which remarks Minato, the yellow flash of Konoha, an absolutely unavoidable blade that moves at the speed of light. A technique that shines brightly on the battlefield, a feat, the dazzling name on the street, is the former nickname of the 4th Hokage, which also does help this moniker change argument. So if you go off this idea, Jonin Minato, KCM 1, or even some version below, with Hokage being a step above that, it doesn't look too good for Pain. And the thing is, it's not like Pain doesn't have options in this scenario. Pain has such a wide array of jutsu. Like, he has a lot he can do against Minato. One of the more interesting win cons, if you were gonna like ask me to argue for Pain, is that Pain uses the Rainmaker jutsu, where Pain creates rainfall from rain clouds that he forms with his chakra. Each and every raindrop is linked directly with his senses. It's implied Pain is the one who actually figured out Obito's ability, as Obito is the one who uses Kamui while it's actually raining in the Hidden Rain Village, which is how Konan was essentially able to figure out that 5-minute timer. Pain would have just had a more accurate measurement of what Obito can do, and this could play similarly into Minato with his FTG marking, as the rain is linked directly to Pain's senses. And it's not like Pain has to be present where the rain is. Pain actually just leaves this jutsu active even when he's out of the village, which is pretty insane. The name of the game for Pain is that he just can't hit Minato. Like Bansho Tenin, Shinra Tensei, these attacks, while maybe being effective, Minato's either going to body flicker or FTG out the way and systematically pick apart Pain. He can either just teleport them around, and after he takes down the animal path, which will present problems as these are a bunch of large-scale summons that maybe he could summon Gamabunta to counteract if Gamabunta in this scenario isn't, you know, dealing with a hypothetical Ninetales at the same time. Once the animal path does fall, the Pains will not be able to summon themselves to a different location or have themselves summoned, along with the animals just outright disappearing. The main issue for Minato is just outright taking down the Pains, who are notoriously durable. I'm actually of the opinions that each of the paths of Pain, or at least the Diva path, have just straight up Sage Mode physicality. While you could infer this off their ability to kind of throw down with Sage Mode level users and hand-to-hand combat, something I want to bring attention to is the Black Belted Blades, which I'm going to talk about a bit more in another section, but the main thing I want to know about these blades, specifically when Pain uses them, is that they're actually ridiculously durable. And not only are they durable, they're ridiculously hard to break. The only people who have been shown in the manga to actually snap these rods are Sage Mode Jiraiya, Sage Mode Naruto, and Pain himself. Characters like Kakashi only snap the rods in the anime. The same thing Hinata when she has her little "I love you" moment to Naruto. In the manga against Kakashi, Kakashi actually never is able to snap the rod. It's lodged in his shoulder and he actually just backs out of it, compared to the anime where he just breaks it from the side. And in Kakashi's case, he clearly would have tried from the way he's gripping the rod. Like, I don't know why he's gripping another man's rod like that, but it's just, it might just be me. It might just be me. The Black Belted Blades are actually extremely difficult to even break. So it actually is a feat, since we haven't seen weaker characters actually display the ability to break them. And they actually are ridiculously durable. An example of this being when Four Tails Naruto actually powers up after Naruto is on the ground and, like, pretty much, you know, he has this rod stabbed on his legs and arms and stuff like that. We actually do see that the rods aren't even destroyed from Naruto powering up. They just fall off the Four Tails body. This being relevant because we see that when Jinchuriki power up, it just kind of negates jutsu like Bee sealing in the war. So snapping or even outright destroying a Black Belted Blade is actually kind of a feat in Naruto, which is really weird that most people don't bring it up. Even against the Edo Jinchuriki, like, one of the blades has like a Rasengan pressed on it and it's only cracking a little bit, and Naruto has to use a double Rasengan to actually destroy the small version that was lodged in Han. So Pain's physicality is pretty insane, actually. I think it's kind of underrated. And I mean, this is the same person who can just outrun Six Tails Naruto, handle the recoil being thrown back at him from Six Tails Naruto, eat a Bijou Bomb to the face from Six Tails Naruto. So this is definitely going to be an issue for Minato. Now, most people have brought up the Minato one-shot and have brought up the fact that Minato has clashed with the Bijou Bomb like 4,000 times. I don't want to beat a dead horse, and I did talk about Minato versus Pain in my Pain versus the Hokage video. So if you're more interested in this matchup, I will link that because I just hate repeating myself like this in videos. It is presented that Minato is the one who won that clash, as otherwise the Ninetales would have just outright taken over Kushida and rampaged across the village. And no one at the village at that time, maybe say Hiruzen, would have really been able to restrain a full QB. Minato doing this with a small portion of his chakra while having Kushida's version 2 arm lodged through his torso does have good AP implications if you just go off the idea that this impartial full QB Bijou Bomb scales above more partial variations that we see throughout the show, like the Four Tails Bijou Bomb or Six Tails Bijou Bomb. If you didn't really like that argument, you could also just say Minato goes into Sage Mode to amplify his AP at probably a pretty significant margin, as Sage Mode is just a fusion of your chakra and nature energy, so the buff would be pretty insane. Now, I don't personally rep Minato's Sage Mode. I think it's kind of doo-doo water. Minato makes this self-admission that it takes him way too long to charge up the nature energy, and the Sage Mode runs out just as quickly. But to play devil's advocate, taking too long to charge up energy is relative to Minato's speed and how long Minato thinks is a long time. So it actually may not be that long, and it may last a bit longer as well. Like, we don't know necessarily how long Minato's like gauging this, so it could be a bit longer. Again, I personally don't rep it, but there is that argument. So Minato does have better implications on what he can do, but I think the biggest like hurdle he has to get over is actually just damaging Pain and being able to permanently put down the paths of Pain. But if you do think his AP just goes that high, he really shouldn't have an issue. None of the techniques really should be tagging him. So I think Minato does get the pass on this one. And I mean, at the end of the day, Minato watched Naruto fight Pain, and he's like, listen, you know that Obito guy, the guy I fought and just beat? You're going to need a lot more power to just beat him. So yeah, and then that's obviously confirmed multiple times later on. That being the Kyuubi's chakra, that being higher variations. Wherever you think that is exactly, you know, that's fair. It just is a level beyond what Naruto should be. Next up, we have Obito versus Jiraiya in the Rain Village. And I think it's a pretty bad stomp. I'm not going to lie. There's no real problems for Obito in this exact situation. Nothing Jiraiya has starting off in base is remotely threatening to him. I don't even think Sage Mode is necessarily that much of a conversation. You have a guy who's a Minato level threat versus a guy who just isn't on Minato's level. It's a pretty big power gap here. Jiraiya would never be able to escape from Obito's space-time ninjutsu. So even if he just had Manpa with him and like ran away or just started firing jutsu while charging up the Gemma Rincho frog ninjutsu, the fight just wouldn't last that long. Now, I don't want to just say Obito BFR, and I am going to talk about some of Obito's different abilities in one of the later matchups in the video because it becomes a lot more relevant. But I just will say, if Jiraiya starts this fight out in base, there's absolutely no hope. Obito just is going to instantly ragdoll him. I feel as if we don't need to spend too much time on this little point right here. So I'm going to keep it moving. Next up, we have Pain versus Konan. And I don't know why I segued into this like this was a more interesting matchup. I'm just going past this. I'm sorry, Konan. You didn't deserve this. You didn't deserve to be put up here. Pain would either just chakra fatigue Konan or just blow away all her paper bombs via Shinra Tensei. Even if she had the like ocean of paper bombs, he could just focus all his chakra into the Diva Path and do that large variant to just pretty much send it all away, you know? So I don't think that's really going to be too much of an issue for her. So yeah, I think Pain's got this. I'm sorry, Konan. Now, next up, we have an actually really fascinating matchup. I think this one's actually really good. This is Orange Mask Obito in Pain's position versus Sage Mode Naruto, the Toad Trio, and Manpa. Now, this is actually fascinating because Obito does not like large groups of people. He does not like fighting them because even though he's never really in immediate danger due to Kamui's passive nature, it always makes it that he has trouble just outright securing the kill because random people are always interfering. A good example of this is Obito versus Fu and Torne. Now, I will say this, first of all, this fight is just garbage to use to try and scale against Obito. Obito is absolutely playing around here as he makes Fu and Torne look like absolute jokes when purposely allowing Torne to pass through him and tag Fu. It's also clear Obito never intended to kill either of them as he keeps both of them hostage and under genjutsu following this fight for the sake of gathering intel. Obito did not need to touch Torne and break his arm off, but instead he opted to do that for the sake of capturing him and extracting intel. Obito does have other jutsu. He can shoot shuriken out from the space-time dimension from a distance, this not being exclusive to shuriken, but he also does have massive kunai that are directly compared to Madara's Yaseka Magatana beats. And I will say, if you don't think Obito gets that much of a stat boost from the Rinnegan and it doesn't shoot him up an entire tier in terms of strength, which I do think there is an argument to be made about that, considering where Obito's lore kind of places him. Obito may actually just be able to cook people by shooting kunai out of the Kamui dimension. They're presented as being on par with Madara's Yaseka Magatana beads, as Naruto's Kyuubi chakra kind of deals with them in a similar way. So it just seems that they're relative in terms of strength and speed. These same beads that they're on a similar level to can actually just bypass Gaara's sand and break through it entirely when him and Onoki are doing that like sand stone golem defense. And not only does it break through the sand, but it actually cracks to the other side of the wood golem. So it actually broke through 2 of those defenses. So even if you argue that to a lessened down version to this Obito, it would just be insanely broken via range ninjutsu. So yeah, he didn't have to touch Torne if he wanted to kill him. He could have just cooked him. Obito has options when he fights. He just doesn't like to use them. An example being how Obito's mastery of 6 paths abilities comes out when he's fighting Konan. he never uses the black belted blade, which is a result of 6 paths. It's not a result of the Rinnegan. The Rinnegan can create them, but this is more so due to Nagato being exposed to the Geto Mazo, which is what the blades are derived from. So Obito actually can create this same blades. He just can't inject chakra the same way that Nagato can via the Rinnegan, which is why Obito needs the Rinnegan later on to use the Edo Jinchuriki. Now, the reason I bring this up is because Obito can use these blades, and on top of everything I mentioned before with the blades and pain, which maybe you can argue just due to them being created off the user's chakra, there could be fundamental differences between each user and how strong the blades actually are, which I do think there is something to, since Obito with the Rinnegan does know his chakra and like Biju binding abilities are a bit stronger than Nagato's. He only uses this blade, which is a result of 6 paths prowess, when he's literally explaining how he has Izanagi and 6 paths light and shadow style. So he only reveals this when he's like revealing all his cards to someone who's dead already. So Obito can do all of this. Now, if he wants to, is a different story. I think in Naruto's case, it's a lot more interesting since Obito does have higher assertions, again, from compared to like Sage Mode Naruto. Pretty much every one of Naruto's attacks is just not going to hit Obito. Same thing with everybody on the battlefield, with Obito having long range jutsu. He has Uchiha Keijin, which is the flame formation barrier that he uses when he has the Rinnegan, but it's an Uchiha technique, like the Rinnegan didn't give him that, and it's a low chakra technique regardless. The same technique keeping out and stonewalling the A-tail, so it would be effective at pretty much gatekeeping or separating out maybe some of the toads or just separating somebody from Naruto. So Obito does have options at this point. He just kind of needs to stall out Naruto's Sage Mode timers, or just be wary of Ma and Pa for a potential Gemarinsho Genjutsu. But even then, Obito could pre-activate Izanagi, which lasts from 5 to 10 minutes, depending on your interpretation, which would also allow him to stall out Naruto's Sage Mode 5-minute timer, which most people don't bring up in these battles either. As Naruto in this case wouldn't really be throwing Rasen Shuriken at Obito, as they would just miss every single time. So this battle is simply Obito just stalling out using his long-range jutsu if he decides he isn't feeling as cautious and actually does want to reveal some of his arsenal. If you also do go off the idea that Obito does have a relative strength just due to the Hashirama cells to pain, it actually may be possible for him to actually damage Naruto with his black belted blade as well, which the black belted blades also don't heal conventionally as well. So for example, when Nagato actually shoots one at Naruto, who is not only in Sage Mode but actually has the Kyuubi chakra stacked on top of it and reverts down to base, Naruto actually still hasn't healed from that like initial Rinnegan rod that we see when he pulls out the book. Like he still has that same wound that's bleeding, which matters because when he gets the Kyuubi's chakra, it auto heals him, and then he also has passive healing on top of that. So the rod's damage as well isn't really conventional. Like even when Obito stabs Kakashi in the war, Kakashi for a small wound actually has to give himself stitches and can't just patch it up. So even the damage they do is unconventional and is pretty insane. So these 6 paths blades are no joke, and if you go off that like relative strength idea, you would also be able to damage Naruto, or at the very least be effective in taking down a couple members here like Ma and Pa. Gamabunta, Mr. Gamakin, and Gama Hero are all Genjutsu fodder as well. There's no way they're going to be able to resist Genjutsu that can just outright control the Ninetales. So Obito could even turn some of Sage Mode Naruto's own combatants against him. Only real way Naruto wins is maybe you argue he catches Obito lacking via materialization, where he maybe extends his attack range via Sage Mode for Akumite. An explanation also that you could use is that Obito deliberately didn't capture Naruto because he just didn't want to fight Sage Mode Naruto, Kakashi, and Yamato later on. But Obito's motivations later on are more so him wanting to have Sasuke power up and have Sasuke fight Naruto specifically for his entertainment. So I don't really like to look at that as a good argument. So yeah, Obito should clear, but this is actually kind of an interesting fight. Like, I don't think this would be free. This would actually be a really tough fight for Obito. And he would have to, especially if you argue Obito isn't revealing his jutsu, just him running around via Kamui and like trying to BFR Naruto would almost be nigh impossible in this situation. So this situation would actually force Obito to reveal a pretty good portion of his arsenal just to get out of these strenuous circumstances, to say the least. Along with the added bonus that Naruto can just fight with his eyes closed versus Sharingan user does add to the difficulty in this encounter. Like, Obito's almost hard countered here because Naruto does have a bit of nature energy boost. His reaction times are going to be boosted. So due to that, it will also make it easier to just get Obito on those like BFR attempts if he tries to like come up behind him and just grab him. Naruto will have those better reaction times to aid him against Obito. A good example of this is in the war arc when Naruto's fighting White Mask Obito and he's in QB Chakra mode. You actually see him when Obito disappears from his line of sight completely, actually just does take a moment to pause and try and sense Obito, and actually does peep him when he comes out from underneath him. Although that is a very different form of threat perception, I feel like you can extend the argument just a little bit here. Next up, I have Pain versus Danzo, Fu, and Torne, and you might say maybe Obito didn't really fight Danzo. Shut up, it's my video. Moving on though, essentially this is a pretty interesting discussion. I think Fu and Torne get obliterated almost instantly. I don't think they're of the same caliber as like Sage Mode Jiraiya or even like peak Jonin throughout the leaf that Pain can continuously take down. I don't really think they're that big of an issue. They're probably just sub Yamato level since Yamato is regarded to be at the top of the Anbu, but that is mostly or like pertaining to like the third's reign, so they could actually still be stronger than Yamato, but I do want to note that. But realistically, like no, they're not doing anything. The meat of this discussion is Danzo. I think Fu and Torne get obliterated almost instantly. Can Danzo beat Pain even with Izanagi? I don't think so. I don't think it's even close. I think Pain has a pretty easy time against Danzo. Danzo's going to struggle to actually take down the Pats of Pain. Danzo without Izanagi respawns is physically actually the weakest of the 5 Kage. I know that seems like a hot take, but even a character like Mei, who doesn't really have a substantial growth later on in the war arc or is known for her physicality, can still just tank Susanoo punches to the face from a stronger avatar compared to Danzo, who's repeatedly just getting one shot by them. Pain at this point just has way too much coverage, just way too many ways to beat Danzo down, way too many summons that he can stack that Danzo really wouldn't have any answers for aside from just conventional wind ninjutsu such as the Vacuum Blast or Vacuum Blade. Pain also scales very well here because he's objectively above the Sage Mode Naruto that he had fought in the Leaf, whether you argue that's a fatigued Pain or not. Naruto being heavily implied to be at the same level as Sasuke by the end of the summit. Now, whether or not you think Sasuke wins in that fight, I don't care. I just think they are very close. Naruto has a good gauge on Sasuke's strength, sensing his battle with Kakashi as he approaches the battlefield, that being 2 Susanoo arrows versus Kakashi, along with Sasuke's MS peeking out. The Naruto website also just listing Naruto and Sasuke during this fight as being evenly matched. The Naruto website article is being written by Caramel Mama, who is also credited for writing the 10th anniversary guide, a canon guide that is canon to the Naruto manga, with Caramel Mama also being directly referenced in the 10th anniversary guide itself among its writers. Now, sometimes the interns can differ on the Naruto like birthday articles, but you can just maybe argue like they were hired later or these are just different writers who are just working directly under Caramel Mama. So I actually do think there is a bit to be drawn from the Naruto birthday articles, as they have good ties to a source that is directly referenced in the manga itself, being oversaw by a writer who has been on both projects. For those who don't know what Caramel Mama is, it is a Japanese editing and production service. This editing and production service has worked on numerous other mangas such as Dragon Ball and its guides such as the Daizenshu, being recruited for the official Naruto website back in 2022. Caramel Mama has also outright just worked on Naruto databooks such as Databook 1, where Kishimoto directly credits them, with them being the top spot in editing cooperation in Databooks 2 and 3. Not to mention also directly working on the databook for Naruto the Last. So to say that this editorial service hasn't had an extensive relationship with the Naruto series is an understatement, and it does help add the validity of using the Naruto websites as somewhat supplementary material. If you really want to get into it, they've also just been responsible on working on the anime since it started airing in 2007, specifically Naruto Shippuden, along with the fact that this is the method Shueisha chose to release the Boruto databases, which is essentially a replacement for the databooks on the Naruto website. So if you actually did want a secondary source, you could look at the Naruto birthday articles, as the people writing them do come from a credible line. This being consistent with the narrative that's pushed with Naruto and Sasuke, that when they are both at a high enough level or close enough in strength that they're able to trade thoughts through their blows, with both conceding that through an all-out fight they both would die. The Naruto manga and website both supporting this notion. But I will concede that Koto would have an effect on the Rinnegan, even though the Rinnegan does have a natural genjutsu resistance. For example, one of the Chunin who is being interrogated in the Leaf has over 13 genjutsu blockers placed in his head just as a jutsu that Pain can place on random people. The Rinnegan is generally touted as the highest grade of dojutsu as it evolves from the Mangekyo Sharingan. The databook remarks it as the most sublime or the highest like ocular vision, with the chapter 508 synopsis statement regarding it as the strongest dojutsu. But the thing about Koto is that it just kind of circumvents the whole I have a stronger dojutsu than you, so I can kind of like fight back against you or mitigate or just kind of overpower you in a Genjutsu battle. So Kodo probably just is an issue for Pain, but I don't even think the fight would actually get there. I think Pain has way too much in his arsenal. All of the Pat's abilities. He has summonings to cover himself for Danzo's respawns. He can just play at a distance. Nothing Danzo has is really going to be that threatening, and Pain should actually just wear down the timer before Kodo would even recharge in time. This is also, if I'm not being ratty and just saying that due to Obito actually starting his fight against Fu, Torine, and Danzo before Danzo had actually unlocked his arm, isn't the starting point. If you say that, then Danzo's double fucked. So yeah, if it's just that version of Danzo with his arm that's still sealed up and stuff like that, one Rinnegan rod is all it takes for Pain to take him down. Then just from there, it just goes GG. Last up, we have red-haired Nagato versus Kakashi in Obito's place in the Kamui dimension. Now, this is a very interesting fight since a lot of people are split on what happens during this fight. I will say this much, right? So this is the way I interpret this fight. It is clear that Kakashi has a general speed scaling that puts him pretty relative to Obito in close quarters combat. Now, a lot of people point to the fact that Obito did throw the fight, and this is true. His main objective in that fight was to not beat Kakashi. That is very evident by some of the things he does in that fight. For example, he uses a regular fireball, which he's never done before, versus like what he could have done, a fire style bomb blast dance. He didn't use any of his wood style. He didn't use any of his Rinnegan abilities. So it's very clear that he's just not going all out in this encounter. And that's okay. Kakashi can still be relative in close quarters combat, even if Obito isn't using all of his techniques. Obito also just isn't using his natural fighting style as he's fighting without Kamui. So it's like, it shouldn't be an issue that Kakashi can just like compare him close quarters. He just wouldn't beat Obito outside the Kamui dimension. That's all it would mean. And it cuts both ways because you have scenes like Kakashi getting ready to Raikiri Kakashi as soon as they get into the Kamui dimension, Obito kind of being stunned. And then you have other scenes with like Obito landing on his back and actually getting off the ground with one hand, both not being usable via one of them having the like black belted rod on it, and then jumping upright and standing to clash with the Kakashi, who had already been charging downward and applied a Raikiri to this blade. So again, like, this cuts both ways. Kind of nitpicking this fight for one fighter or the other doesn't really work. It's a lot safer to suggest that they're both comparable in close quarters at a similar level, and Obito is just more so withholding his techniques and not fighting with his natural fighting style. This also shouldn't really be that surprising considering even outside the Kamui dimension, characters like Naruto and Guy can compete with Obito for short periods of time. So this really shouldn't be that crazy to anybody. Now, with that being said, where does that kind of place Kakashi? It places him in a good place to suggest that he would just be a bit faster than or able to deal with Nagato in terms of close quarters. The best way I could describe this fight is that Kakashi has better speed scaling, like in favor of him due to him scaling to Obito in this regard. And then like everything else just completely goes to red-haired Nagato. Nagato's scaling does somewhat cap at QB Naruto and the likes of version 2 Killer B, whereas Kakashi is able to fight alongside a Naruto who's improving with Kurama's chakra. This would also be a version of Naruto who just isn't having his chakra split up via shadow clones. Said shadow clones would have long since popped at this point during the war. So it's kind of a situation where Kakashi does have better stat implications, where Nagato just has such a dominating arsenal. I mean, all of the Rinnegan abilities, all of the potential summons, Chibaku Tensei in the Kamui dimension, which sets up this weird situation where like Nagato has so much, but just due to where Kakashi's at, could he really just run up and Raikiri like Nagato's head off at that point? It's a little less far-fetched when you consider the idea that Kakashi later on in the war, after the Kamui dimension, is actually a bit of a Minato rival, and the fact that he's able to fight against Uzetsu controlling Obito with Minato. There are blast marks all around the battlefield on both sides, and Minato and Kakashi are huffing and puffing, so a battle did occur here, which again just really has good stat implications for Kakashi. But it's kind of like, do you really think that'd be enough to take down Nagato? If not, and you actually think Nagato could get a hold of Kakashi or just chakra drain him completely, it would be kind of cooked for him. The fact Kakashi also has or would have had fought the Rinnegan pretty extensively at this point would aid him greatly in this type of scenario. This also being a factor in why Obito didn't expend extra chakra in using the Pain's abilities against Kakashi and Guy. Kakashi should have the AP to just tear through Nagato as well, and Nagato's durability is pretty significant, whether you think he just outright reacts to version 2B or actually does tank his lariat before he actually saps off his version 2 cloak. Obito does concede that Kakashi actually could have killed him in the Kamui dimension. This being significant since Obito is notorious for just tanking Rasengans while in the Kamui dimension, whether to his arm or directly to his face. Now, due to Nagato being an Edo Tensei and him being sealed directly, that actually does leave a lot of problems for Kakashi because he wouldn't have effective enough sealing jutsu to put down Kabuto. Kakashi actually does have some pretty impressive sealing ninjutsu. He's actually able to seal the curse mark back in part 1. This being something Sasuke himself actually calls back on to actually unseal Orochimaru from the curse mark. But binding a curse mark via your own sealing formula is not the same, obviously, as just sealing the soul of an entity that is set or like put on an immortal body. So if you just say like Kakashi has the stat advantage but can't seal Nagato, yeah, Nagato is just going to regenerate and completely overwhelm Kakashi at a certain point. Whether he just stacks summons, starts launching out Shibaku Tensei, or just blows Kakashi back with large gravitational waves. Inversely, if you want to be kind of ratty, you could say Kakashi just leaves the Kamui dimension, which it kind of does after a certain point. So the short answer is Kakashi should outstat Nagato, but wouldn't actually have something to permanently put down Nagato in this situation. Maybe he could like stun him for long periods of times with right on shadow clones or lightning cables, but Nagato would just eventually outlast him and just catch him off guard or take him down with something. So Kakashi would win that. It was a straight up fight. Or if you go with the idea that like Nagato can't be sealed, he technically would get a W, which isn't really a win con. I'm more so just noting that if you wanted to like make more of a case for Nagato. So that's the video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. I don't want to milk the watch time too much on this one because I could just throw in matchups like, oh, Nagato versus Tensei's Madara, who's gonna win? Like, I don't want. Ain't nobody trying to hear all that. So that's the video. Let me know what you guys thought down below. If you enjoyed the video, why, and I will catch you next time.